Hi, I'm Jennifer Cohn, and I'm here today with Lynn Bernstein, who is an aerospace engineer turned election integrity advocate. And, we're friends. We met through the election integrity movement, and I'm really happy to have her here today to discuss the situation in North Carolina. She's started a non is it a nonprofit, Lynn?
Right now it is a group of volunteers, but it hopefully soon will be an official nonprofit.
It's called, Lynn has started an election integrity group called Transparent Elections North Carolina. And so anyway, thank you, Lynn, for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
How are you doing?
Times right now are a little overwhelming, but I'm just putting one foot in front of the other, and we're gonna try to make things better here in North Carolina.
Okay, terrific. So I asked you if you wanted, if you would be interested in letting me interview you because I'd seen some of your posts concerning the handling of absentee ballots. And so before sort of getting into more of the details of what you've observed, can you tell me what is the general situation in North Carolina with vote by mail?
So they've really expanded vote by mail. In the past, we've had about 5% of our North Carolina voters voting by mail, and now they're expecting about 40%. Also, the laws have changed a bit where now the board can start processing absentee ballots 5 weeks before the election rather than 2. And so that means they're opening up ballots and actually putting them through the tabulators.
And is it no excuse vote by mail?
No excuse. Yep, no excuse. And the other great thing about North Carolina is that you can request an absentee ballot sort of as an insurance policy where you have that ballot, and if for some reason you can't make it on election day, as long as you go to the post office and have it postmarked by 5 p.m. on election day, you don't have to
Oh, wow.
You don't have to forfeit your ballot if you decide to vote on election day. So I would encourage everyone to request an absentee ballot. And if you decide you want to vote in person, that's fine. Shred your ballot.
Do you have to bring it with you to shred it?
No, they verify everything after the election and make sure that you haven't already voted.
I see. So they don't even make you vote provisionally. You just vote. And
right.
Okay, great. That's good to know. So can you tell me, I know though that everything isn't perfect with absentee voting based on your observations in North Carolina. And can you tell me what role did you play during the primaries in Wake County, North Carolina, and why Wake County?
So I'm a resident of Wake County, and I was an official at-large observer for the Wake County Democratic Party. And I wish there was a way to be an observer in a nonpartisan way, but North Carolina, they allow each political party to have a certain number of at-large observers. And since the Democratic Party knew that I was already working in election integrity, they asked me to head up their group of observers.
Oh, okay. So you actually, and how many observers did you head up?
We had about 5 to 6. We're allowed 10. So for this next election, we're absolutely going to have 10. And that means we can pop in and out of any precinct. We can check out what's going on.
Wow. So it's you get that many for the entire county, but you can
the county.
Fluid. Okay.
Yep. Yeah. So I had people go in that morning and make sure that they watched the boot up of the tabulator. We use hand marked paper ballots in Wake County, which is fantastic. But
at the precincts and vote by mail. Yeah.
Yeah. Everything's hand marked paper ballot. And so I had our observers go in the morning to watch the machines being booted up because I had heard of stories, and I had actually experienced this when I was a poll worker a couple years ago, that the chief judge booted up the machine before the other poll workers got there, and they're supposed to wait until the 2 other judges are there, then boot up the machine, because people are signing that they have verified that no ballots are in that bin, that there's the zero tape that comes out at the beginning that makes sure there's no votes loaded onto that machine. And so I wanted to go ahead and make sure that we had people there first thing in the morning to make sure that they saw the boot up of the machines.
Okay, and can you just pause right there and explain a little bit what the zero tape is?
Sure. So probably ballot stuffing has been a thing since the beginning of voting. Has been a thing, and so the zero tape is essentially a way to make sure that the machine doesn't have any electronic ballot stuffing going on, where the poll workers are supposed to check underneath the bin where you put your ballot into the tabulator. It scans it, it drops it down into this bin. So they visually check for no ballots are actually in the bin, and then an electronic check is, it's sort of this cash register type receipt that comes out of the tabulator, and it will show that no votes have been already loaded onto that machine.
Or at least it should show that anyway.
Right.
So hopefully it shows that. So, okay, so can you tell me what you observed? Well, I know you had some concerns about lack of transparency with all of these, you and the other observers, I guess. Can you tell me a little bit about that, in particular, starting with what you saw at the precincts?
So
in-person voting.
Yeah, so my experience at the boot up of the machines, my experience where I was, the chief judge had no problem showing me that the tape was zeroed out, that there was 0 on the tape. One of our observers was at Chavis Community Center, and that has the largest number of minority voters in Wake County. And so we decided to send one of our observers there. And the chief judge said no, that he could not look at the 0 tape, and then called the election director and came back and said that he had spoken with the election director, and the election director agreed that he didn't have to show the tape. And so the 5 or 6 of us continued to go around, and we asked a few of the chief judges, hey, what time did you boot up the machine? I just wanted to know the time stamp. And several of them were very generous and went over and unrolled the tape to see the timestamp. They could have told me no, but they showed us the 0 tape. And then about 11 o'clock in the morning, the election director from Wake County got a hold of one of our observers and was startlingly abrupt and upset that we were asking to see the 0 tape or asking for the timestamp, and told us that if we so much as even asked to see another 0 tape, he was going to kick all of us out for the day.
Wow. Is there a law on the 0 tapes on making them?
So the observers, if they are there when the machine is booted up, they are supposed to be able to see that tape. At the end of the election, any member of the public can go into the precinct after the last voter has walked out of the precinct. The public is allowed to go in, watch the machine, the tabulator machine being shut down, watch the end of night poll tape being printed. And they're supposed to be either told what the numbers are, but generally chief judges will just post that poll tape, on the wall for people to see.
Wait, so we have the 0 tapes, and the election director for the entire county is saying he's not going to let you see them. And does the law specifically say that the public gets to see the 0 tapes specifically? The 0 tapes aren't part of the law. I got clarification after the election. I was told by the board, but the board did tell me some other things that weren't correct either. So I'm not sure how much to you have to double check it.
This. But I was told that if we were there when the 0 tape was generated, we were allowed to see it. So I will make sure that we have people at this next election right there while it's being booted up.
Right. That's why it's so important to go to these primaries now to work out these kinks, as opposed to waiting till.
Right.
And so I'm really glad you're doing that. So we got the 0 tape. Can you explain you also mentioned a poll tape at the end of voting. Can you explain what that is?
Right. So at the end of the night, the chief judge will essentially tally all the machine will tally all the votes. So the chief judge, they take all the actual physical ballots out, they put them in a box. They're supposed to be in a box with a tamper evident seal that has a serial number. They don't do that. It's just a generic sticker, unfortunately. And then they essentially, press a few keys, and they run this sort of long cash register type tape that shows a better breakdown than what you normally get at the county level. So it will show how many undervotes candidates had, how many overvotes for certain races. And it just breaks down all of the totals. And so I want to see those because I would like to verify that those numbers match the ones that the county puts out. Essentially, it's just another way for the public to gain confidence to verify that that the receipts match, right?
Right, exactly. It's like balancing a checkbook. I mean, so you probably know this, maybe you don't. ProtectOurVotes.com is, I and a few other women has started this website, and we're trying to get a poll tape review project off the ground as well called Photo Finish. And yeah, I don't like to call I'm sure I know you agree with this. I don't call it an audit because there can still be meddling that it doesn't catch. But the central tabulators are those county computers, right? And that aggregate the precinct totals, and it's kind of often considered a very desirable target for bad actors. And so what this can do is see if anything changes between the precincts and the central tabulators after. Really helpful for that.
And my hope is, and I'm hoping to get, and I'm planning to get volunteers to go out and do that same thing, and take photographs of those poll tapes, and then we'll go ahead and verify them. And ideally, all the numbers match up, and we can sort of back our board and say, yeah, they ran, at least that part of the election has been verified by the public. And so ideally, I hope that's what happens. At the one precinct where the chief judge refused to let us see the zero tape, I had my neighbor, I was at another precinct and knew I wouldn't make it back in time. But since the public, you don't need any special access, the public is allowed to go and see that poll tape. I asked him to go to Chavis Community Center to see the poll tape, and the chief judge refused to let him see it. He said, "Oh, I've got to get this stuff back to the Board of Elections. Sorry, I don't have time," and refused to even tell him what the numbers were. So my neighbor and I actually, I got to that community center right as that chief judge was closing his trunk. And so the two of us headed over to the Board of Elections because I wanted to see that tape. But we got there, we maybe made 5 steps out of our car in the parking lot, and were met in the parking lot by the executive director, the deputy director, and then somebody who I think was more of like a security type person. And we were told to leave the premises immediately, or, the implication was, you will leave this premises immediately. And the implication was that he would most likely call the police if we didn't leave.
Jesus.
So and at the time, I thought, okay, well, that's something I'm going to have to fix. North Carolina doesn't allow people in on election night. And the next morning I made some phone calls and found out that North Carolina does in fact let people in to the county boards of elections on election night. Durham did, Guilford County, many counties do, because the law is really clear. It says any member of the public wishing to witness the vote count at any level shall be allowed to do so. And so once I realized it was just Wake County, I did push back on the board and was told, no, and by the way, we are going to report the other counties for allowing people to go observe on election night. So that is an ongoing battle that I'm having with them. So had I known that other counties were letting people in, I definitely would have stood my ground. I probably would have called reporters. And I do hope that there are reporters that show up at Wake County Board of Elections on election night, because I will be there along with many other people asking to get in.
Wow. Is there, so in order to be an observer at the precincts, you have to be one of those sort of appointed observers by the party, or a campaign can do it too, right?
I don't know that a campaign can do it. I believe it's just political parties. So but even, Green Party, many, every party gets, I think, an equal number. So if you're, people would just have to go to their political party and ask to be an observer.
But do you think you need to sign up with your political party for the county observation as well? I mean, you were signed up, so it should have been fine.
Right. You mean for the canvas or for election day?
Well, it's starting with election day. That's where you were turned away, right? Because you were trying to.
Right. I was turned away on election night. Yeah. So for election day, you have to, your name has to be submitted by the county political party. And then the election director, I think, approves that. As long as you are of good moral character, they will approve that.
So if people are interested in signing up to do this, should they contact your organization, or should they who would they contact to do this? Just the North Carolina Democratic Party or North Carolina?
Right. So whatever party. I'm actually working with a couple of Republicans who are trying to pull together some of their observers, and we're on the same page about those zero tapes and about looking for some of these things that in the past weren't really looked at. So whatever political party you're aligned with, you should contact that county political party and just tell them that you want to be an at-large observer. And then if you're in the Democratic Party, your name would come to me, and then I would, interview you and make sure that you knew what you were getting into. And then and same for the other political parties.
Okay.
But anyone can go to the canvas, to the pre-canvas, to the audit.
So what exactly is a canvas? Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, so we're not allowed to see a lot of it, unfortunately, but a canvas essentially is when a county board receives ballots, it's the whole process of approving them, looking at the signatures, making sure somebody hasn't voted yet, taking the ballots out of the envelopes, putting them in the tabulator. It's sort of like, I guess it's kind of like an audit, but not really.
So it's after the results have been posted already, or is it before?
The unofficial results get posted on election night, and then in North Carolina, it's somewhere between 9 or 10 days, depending on if it's an odd year or even year. And the board has to have a meeting of the canvass, and that's when they take all the rest of the ballots that have come in. They take the provisional ballots from election day, and they essentially check signatures, run those through the tabulators. And then, so they do that canvas before they put out the official result, and they do the audit before they put out the official results. But we're allowed to sort of do a pre-canvas in North Carolina, where ballots will come in weeks ahead of time, and our county boards are allowed to start processing those.
To make sure that the signatures match and that sort of thing.
Right, and to make sure people are registered to vote and their address is correct and all of that stuff. I did see some issues when I went to our pre-canvas and the canvas that I also addressed with the board. And they don't really seem interested in hearing that the idea of transparency and how that actually benefits them. I actually did talk to the chair of Bladen County, and she really fully understands that the more transparent she can be, the more likely it's going to be that they don't have any contested elections. The more likely it's going to be that their voters believe in the process. She's inviting people in, and it's great if you can have the public there and the League of Women Voters there, and they can all vouch for your process and say, yep, she let us see the whole process. We didn't see anyone shredding ballots. We saw signatures being matched. They were fully open, and that's really what you want. And she was pretty brave in taking on that role, and she's really working to make her county very transparent. Unfortunately, Wake County, they've decided to go the other route, which is sort of security through obscurity. If nobody sees what's going on, then nobody can question us, and therefore we can say we ran a clean election and there won't be any problems. That's not how I would run an election, but
no, me either. So I know that chain of custody is sort of something that often falls by the wayside, I think, because we fight so hard to get, robust manual audits, which is the only way. Well, looking at the paper ballots and comparing them to electronic outcomes is the only way to confirm the electronic outcome is correct. We fight so hard to get that and don't even get that even that isn't going to do anything if you don't have a secure and transparent chain of custody. And so I'm hoping that you can, I know you had some issues with what you saw with the chain of, or didn't see with the chain of custody. And one of those had to do with the poll manual.
Right.
So a poll manual.
Yeah. So so this one isn't related to Wake County. So what I did was I sent a request to all 100 counties in North Carolina asking for their latest poll manual, because what I originally was looking for was, are they instructing their poll workers to post the poll tape? Are they letting them know that people have the right to come in and watch that process? And what I ended up finding was some of these counties have processes in their manuals that are alarming, very concerning. Actually, it was one of the first 3 poll worker manuals I looked at. One of the counties, they're telling their chief judge to go to the precinct the night before and boot up the electronic poll book where you would check in poll workers. Now, those are connected to the internet because they have to link to the Board of Elections to make sure they have the correct information and so forth. And so they instruct the chief judge to go in, boot up actually physically turn on this computer, and then just leave for the night. And, the poll workers, every poll worker I've ever met is very well-meaning. They try to just follow the instructions. They don't really understand all the details, and they don't really understand that what they're doing is really opening up that chain, that link in that chain
to the internet.
To the internet. That's real. And so I did go to the state board and ask them if they would please instruct their instruct their counties to do a few things: post poll tapes, don't boot up these machines ahead of time. And I'm either getting ignored or told it's fine. There are videos in the warehouse, so we don't have any concern. So I think what I might do is just reach out to some individual county chairs and let them know, hey, that's not such a great process to boot up that machine the night before.
Right. Okay. So electronic poll books that's sort of they've been around for many years. However, they've really taken off, I think, since the 2016 election. And I saw Brennan Center did a report in 2018 that said it was almost like a 50% increase in the use of them nationwide since 2016. And then it's something like 34 states use them in at least some of their counties, and there's maybe 6 states that use them statewide. And those are the tablet computers, right, that sign in,
Right.
that voters sign in with, and it confirms their that their voter registration system is that they're registered to vote and they haven't voted previously. And they've replaced paper poll books. There used to be paper poll books only, I think, and there still are in many places. And yeah, the connecting to the internet, are you saying, I know that for early voting, they absolutely have to connect to the internet, but are they also connecting them to the internet on election day, or are they in North Carolina?
So Wake County does not. Wake County uses electronic poll book for early voting because we also have same-day registration, which is fantastic. We use paper poll books on election day, which I love.
Good.
I've worked as a poll worker. I'm not sure if you remember, Durham County in 2016 had an issue, right? So they booted up their poll books in the morning. First dozen or so voters streamed in, and each voter was told, oh, it looks like you already voted. And after 6 or 7 of these where voters said, no, I did not vote yet, they went ahead and scrambled and went to Kinko's and printed paper poll books and got those to the precincts, but it did delay the election. Some people left. It's unclear if those people came back. So I would.
And it was never really explained, right? I mean, they can, 2 years later, they finally did a forensic analysis, but that's kind of late to be able to tell if.
Right. Well, they were using VR systems, and now we know that VR systems was hacked by Russia.
Mm-hmm.
They have not. The report that came out from the state said it was user error, but I've heard other people who are more in the know who say it probably wasn't user error, but they're not ready to come out and say that they were absolutely hacked. So
Kim Zetter did a report on it, right? And she said they couldn't find evidence of hacking. It's sort of one of those things where lack of evidence isn't evidence of absence.
Right.
Absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. And it was so long after the election that maybe it was even almost 3 years that they finally looked at the poll books. But it also, the vendor itself, they have remote access to these systems, right? So, I mean, it could also, people's definition of hacking sometimes varies. I think oftentimes people think of hacking as just the internet. I actually looked up the definition once, and I think it can be any type of malicious manipulation, but corrupt insiders could do that too, right?
Right. I mean, just even disrupting the polls, enough where if somebody got into that system and changed some addresses, changed, a middle initial, that would disrupt the election enough. And in North Carolina, we have close elections. I mean, we are a swing state, and I've heard Wake County being called the swingiest county in the swingiest state.
Really?
And so, if you're turning away dozens of voters because the poll books aren't accurate, the electronic poll books aren't accurate, that's a problem. I'm really, really glad that Wake County uses paper poll books on election day, but how people vote in other counties affects our entire state. So,
right. Do you know what did Durham do? I mean, are they still using VR systems poll books? Do you know?
I don't know. I do have one volunteer, and he is working on that project, finding out which counties have which systems. And so we're going to get together this weekend and kind of look at all that and see, what recommendations we could make to kind of help things run a little bit more smoothly on election day.
Right,
I would imagine Durham has learned their lesson. They were very transparent on election night with people.
I thought, didn't they want to not use VR systems again, and the court said they had to? I think that.
Oh, I don't know.
Maybe
about
it wasn't
that
Durham.
case.
Maybe it was somewhere else. But somewhere else didn't want to use VR again because they had been breached by Russia. Although VR, we should say, actually denies it, but then it's pretty definitive that at least the government thinks that they were infiltrated, and Mueller did. So
right.
Yeah,
I'm not sure about
okay,
that case.
So
yeah.
I'm really glad you brought up the poll manuals. Did you do a Freedom of Information Act request, or you just requested copies?
So in North Carolina, it's a public records request, and if you ask for a record, they're supposed to give it to you. So you don't have to do any sort of formality. You send the chair of your board or the election director of the county board an email just requesting it. They're supposed to give it to you. Apparently, we have really great open records laws, yet what in reality happens is you request records, you don't get them, you have to sue. That's generally what ends up happening in North Carolina because.
But you didn't have to sue for the.
No. The counties willingly let me see their poll, their poll worker manuals, and they're mostly the same because we use a lot of the same systems. But I was finding things like booting up the electronic poll book the night before.
Well, those poll book manual, I'm just glad you brought it up because there's so many pieces to kind of keep in play. And, I do try to do this advocacy too. And, I kind of forgot about the poll manuals. I first heard about getting them from John Brakey of Audit USA. And just, you can figure out are they sending the results over a modem or whatever. You can find all kinds of things in the poll manuals that are not generally known. So it's a really good tip for anyone doing this type of voter protection integrity work. So, all right. This was actually the original. This next question is the original reason why I think I asked you, which had to do what you saw happening with absentee ballots during the pre-canvass term time period.
Yeah. So as you know, the chain of custody, it's really a chain, and every link in that chain is just as valuable as another link. And really, that chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And so the public is only getting to see a few links in that chain. We don't there's no audit of how many unused ballots are there still in the warehouse and
unused mail ballots, you mean?
Unused ballots, yeah. So how many are still in there? There's no, there are a lot of things that we can't see. And what we could see was troubling. In Wake County, we have a giant warehouse. There are other counties that have a smaller space. And so I think people can see a little bit better. They put us way in the back of the warehouse. There's just no way that you're going to be able to see the high-speed tabulator at the other end of the warehouse. put you kind of
binoculars. Can you bring binoculars maybe?
I don't know.
In Texas, I was told that's actually what they're doing when they go to the central count.
Yeah. I mean, I have thought about that because I have thought about that because we really can't see what's going on. But as I was sitting there, and there were 3 or 4 other people that showed up for the canvas. A lot of people don't show up for it, I think, because they feel the way I felt 3 years ago, which was, oh, I'm sure somebody's checking it. Our elections are secure. I don't really need to do anything. And so you can sit, 6 feet away from the auditors, but they're whispering and writing, doing their audit in pencil. It's pretty astounding, some of the stuff that I saw. But one of the things that I saw was so the board will approve ballots. The election director ahead of time and the staff, they check signatures, and then they just hand these batches to the board, and they say, here's a batch. We've checked it. We think these should be approved. And the board sort of sifts through it, and they say, okay, great. These are approved. So the board really, I believe, they're really not doing their duty to really check as much as they should be checking. They really leave it almost all up to the elections director. So these ballots then get handed off to these bipartisan teams that are sitting at tables. And the thing I noticed, this was when they were doing the provisional ballots, was that they were just sort of pulling them out of the envelopes. And I kept looking, and I'm thinking, they're not opening those. And then I watched the next batch, and they're not going to an opener, like an automatic opener. They're just going directly to this bipartisan team, and the bipartisan team is pulling these out. And I'm thinking, those look like they're pre-opened. And I've been here, I was there the whole time, and I didn't see ballots being opened. So they must have been opened before the board even arrived, before the board approved them.
Is it possible? So first of all, explain what a provisional ballot is, just really quick.
Right. So when somebody goes to vote and say like what happened in Durham, they say, oh, I didn't vote yet. What they would do is they'd fill out a provisional ballot. It's the same ballot that everybody else gets, except it's in a different kind of, the voter would seal that into a special envelope and put all of their information on the outside of the envelope. And then the board or the elections director would double check and say, okay, yeah, this person really didn't vote yet. We're going to go ahead and count this ballot. And then that ballot counts just as every other ballot would count.
And these envelopes look like they had been
right.
They're supposed to be sealed. The envelopes.
They're supposed to be sealed. By law, the process is that the board is supposed to approve ballots, then open them, then flatten them because they're folded, and then immediately put them through the tabulator in a continuous process.
These looked like somebody had opened them already.
They were already opened, and I emailed the state board, emailed my legislators who emailed the state board, and got confirmation that yes, they said yes, we do pre-open them because it's we have to do that because we handle such a high volume. And the part that the provisional ballots, there aren't as many there are way more absentee ballots, vote by mail ballots than there are provisional ballots. But the other thing that I discovered was so these
who's doing that pre-opening? Because there's really, when you vote provisionally in North Carolina, is there a way to track whether your ballot was counted? I guess you do get to find out if you voted. Most places at least post whether you voted or not.
Right. It will post whether you voted or not. And I know that our board, they seem to do a good job of tracking down voters if there's some discrepancy. It seems that they do a good job at that. The thing that I take issue with, and the thing that I don't think is actually legal under our general statutes, is that so for 2 weeks before the election, the primary, now it's 5 weeks based on our new law, the board will receive these absentee ballots. They kind of go through this process. The law says it has to be a continuous process, and the board shall not leave except under an emergency situation type thing. And the law does spell out that the board has to approve, open, remove the ballot, and then immediately run it through the scanner. And so what our board is doing, and I only discovered this by looking at their meeting minutes, because when you're there, they're not really clear about what's going on. You see them approving ballots, you see them opening ballots, you see them flattening ballots, and then you see that a poll worker walk to the back of the warehouse and put ballots to the tabulator. And in my mind, I thought, okay, that's the same ballot they just opened, and now it's being scanned. And I called some League of Women Voters ladies who have been going to watch these for years. And I said, are you aware that what they're doing is they're not actually running the ballots they just opened. They're running the ballots that they opened the week before. And then they're holding those ballots that they just opened. And so it's this choppy process, this non-continuous process that now they're going to be allowed to do for 5 weeks. And the League of Women Voters and some other advocates who have gone to watch this process many times, they said, no, that's not what they do, because they open them and then immediately somebody walks back to the tabulator and puts them through. And that is what it looks like when you're sitting there. But when you look at their meeting minutes, and I did confirm with them, and yes, they are not doing it the way the law says they should in a continuous way. They are saying that, yes, they are opening them, they are flattening them, and then they are holding them in a secure location before they run them through the next week. And so, you know,
Eek.
Yeah, I mean, it's astounding that they would even admit that, because it's shocking. And
because someone, I mean, do they tell you what I guess not. They're not going to tell everyone where their secure location.
No, and they don't, don't. It's not like they're putting them in an envelope and putting a security seal on them, and our board is,
And there's constant videotape running, video.
Well, no, there is now. That's what I was told. Don't worry, everything's fine. They have video of everything that goes on in the warehouse. But yet, where's the video? Why can't
can you get the video?
Yeah, they're not going to show it to me.
You should try to FOIA the video.
Oh yeah, I mean, I definitely will do that. I doubt that they will allow that. But so our board just lets them open the envelopes and then they just leave. And our board actually sits closer to where the public sits. So there will be election workers that come over and will hand them paper to sign saying, this is how many ballots we just ran through the tabulator. This is what the tabulator count says. But the board never gets out of their seat, walks around to the tabulators to actually check those numbers. They just sit there and are not actually checking these things. And so nobody's actually checking these things.
And this is is this the county central tabulator, or is this the central scanner?
It's the, it's same thing. So central tabulator.
I thought a central scanner was just a scanner, high-speed scanner for counting absentees, and then it goes to the tabulation room to aggregate. It doesn't?
Well, no. So it does go to, they call it something a little different here, but they intermix tabulator and scanner for the high-speed scanner. But one of the things that I brought to their attention was that on this last day of pre-canvass, so they have this process that, is choppy, but on that last day, they have to run whatever they open right then. And on that last day of pre-canvass, they opened almost 2,000 ballots and they ran them through the tabulators with no problem.
So why are they doing it this other way? That's just so
strange.
strange.
So they're saying that the ballots will get jammed, and so they need to press them. And I've never seen a ballot presser. Like, I've never heard of that. It's kind of.
Do they have a ballot presser?
No. I mean, they just have to rest for a week. It's ridiculous, especially since the vendor. One of the things that the vendor, even their literature says is that this high-speed scanner, this is why you should buy it, because it has the ability to run creased ballots. So
I hate to ask, who's the vendor?
ES&S. Yeah, they do the DS850, and it's a great machine, and it has all the functionality that we need. We need better audits, and we need to have a continuous process like the law says we should. There's no
Isn't the DS850 the one, though, that at DEF CON they showed it could be hacked within 1 minute of direct access?
Oh gosh, I'm not surprised. I think
I'm pretty sure it was the DS850.
And
I swear to it, though, I should say that.
Well, I mean, we don't do enough hand-eye audits either. So we do an audit of a hand-eye audit of 2 precincts per county. And it doesn't matter how big your county is. So they will do an audit of 2 precincts per county. By the time we get there, those boxes are already open that have those ballots. So it's not like our board is checking to make sure that, I mean, it's just a sticker.
Chain of custody again.
Right, a chain of custody again. There's no.
How do you pick those 2 precincts? Is that?
So that's an interesting story. So the state picks the precincts at random, and I'm trying to get a verifiable process because I truly believe that our elections need to be evidence-based. And so I continued to ask the state board that I wanted to see how they picked precincts at random. And finally, they sent me a meeting notice at 8 o'clock, or no, 4:30, that they were going to select the precincts at random at 9:30 the next morning. And this was back in October for our municipal election. And they said, you can watch it remotely on this webinar. And so that night I logged into the webinar to see sort of what platform it was. And the platform sort of touts, you can pre-record a webinar and make it look live. And I thought, you know what? I'm only 20 minutes away from downtown. I'm just going to drive there in the morning. So I drove down there. I got there at 9:15. And at first I was told that the person who was running it wasn't even there yet. And I thought, okay, that's odd. And then I did end up talking to the person who ran it, and they said, oh, well, we're having some computer problems, so you'll have to come back later. But I did work with the state board and convince them to use a process that's verifiable. So before they just generated it with a computer program, and now they roll these 10-sided dice in public.
Oh, good.
10-sided dice thing, get inputted into a computer program.
You did that? You got them to do that?
Yes. Yes.
So great. Congratulations.
Myself and I worked with Phil Stark, and we convinced them this process. So so now the public comes, they actually let the public roll this dice. They give us the code. I have people in this EVN group that I'm part of verify the code. And so now when people ask me, you know, is it really chosen at random? Before I would say, well, you know,
supposedly,
who knows? And now when people ask, I can say, yes, it's chosen at random. I was there. I saw it. I saw people verify it. I can vouch for this. And that's really what I want to do with our elections, is to say, yes, we were there. They let us see the process, and we can vouch for this process. And that's really my goal.
That's terrific. That's amazing. So you mentioned Philip Stark. He's a UC Berkeley professor, statistician, and you also mentioned the phrase evidence-based elections. I think he coined that phrase, and I'm hoping you can explain what it means, because it's very counterintuitive. In the US, we have this idea that the public has to just accept the results, and that the burden is on the public, or maybe the candidates, to prove that fraud occurred. Otherwise, the results are presumptively correct. And that is not an evidence-based election. Can you explain what an evidence-based election is?
Right. So an evidence-based election is really, I mean, it's kind of their evidence. I believe, and Phil Stark believes, and other people believe, that,
and I believe,
you believe, it is up to the elections officials to prove that the outcome is correct. To prove,
certainly should be.
Right. And so could you imagine if your bank didn't send you a statement, they just sent you a number and said, here's how much money you have in your bank account, but we're not going to show you any fees that we took off, or your deposits or your withdrawals. You're just going to have to, you know, trust that works. And it's great if your numbers match up, but if they don't, you want to see more information. And so really, that chain of custody is key for that evidence. There are links in that.
Making it public, right? The transparency is a key part of the evidence. It's meant for in other words, it has to do with proving to the public.
Right, you prove to the public. And the
doors, not, you know, proving to a select few who then tell the public, but making it public. Making
it public and publicly verifiable. So I as a member of the public, should be able to go to the Board of Elections, gather enough evidence that is public record, that I can feel good that my vote was counted the way that I cast it. So that's really what we're going for there.
And the chain of custody is part of it too. I know that in his article that he wrote, he even said perhaps even including videotape, but the videotape then has to be public, so the public can scrutinize it and say, yeah, nobody came in.
Right. And oftentimes candidates after the election, even if they believe that there was fraud, they don't want to come out and say, oh, I don't believe the results of this, because nobody wants to be seen as a sore loser. And so usually candidates just kind of let it go and they won't really push back at all.
So the more that we can put it on the public to be able to get that evidence and do the push for them, I think the better.
Right. And ultimately that's the goal. We want to be able to say, I want to be able to say that Wake County's elections are solid, that if you vote by mail, that your vote, that your ballot's going to be opened, and then the ballot that goes through that tabulator is actually your ballot. Right now, I personally will not be voting by mail. After seeing that process and knowing that my ballot's going to be in a warehouse for a week, along with a bunch of unvoted ballots that are never accounted for. Vote
by mail is a tricky one, right? Because there's a lot of groupthink that happens with elections, and the groupthink right now is that, vote by mail. I keep hearing vote by mail is secure, and it's like, well, the devil is in the details. It can be secure or not, depending on the details.
Depending on the chain of custody, right? Like Colorado, they have a really robust chain of custody.
Right.
They have cameras on almost every part of the process. I've written to them several times to say, hey, how do you guys handle this part of the process? And within a day, I either get an email back that says, here's how we handle it, or a couple of times I've gotten an email back that says, oh yeah, actually the public should know about this. I'll just go ahead and post it on our website. And
this
then
is the Colorado Secretary of State's office?
This is Dwight Shellman.
I was asking if it was Dwight Shellman.
Yeah, they're very, very transparent. And I lived in Colorado for a long time, and now I'm in North Carolina, so I'm trying to improve our process. If I lived in Colorado, I'd probably be doing more hiking and having more fun, because I wouldn't need to do this.
No, you'd be looking like I am. I mean, I'm in California. Yeah. It's not that California's got plenty of problems, but I'm so worried more about the swing states, which I live in. It's a little bit frustrating. I would love to go and watch the process like you do.
But I don't want to say vote by mail is terrible, because I think it can be great. And I think if we processed our ballots in a continuous way, like our legislators have legislated, I would absolutely vote by mail. I think it's a great way to vote. You can take your time with your ballot. You get confirmation that your ballot has been received and approved. And so aside from that one big gap in that chain, that's really what's preventing me from.
There are other, I have other qualms with vote by mail. I mean, I've been so worried about precinct voting. I think that you were sort of in the same thing, because about 80% of the country was voting in person before COVID-19, I think. That's certainly the majority. And then now it's completely flipped to vote by mail. And so although I had qualms about vote by mail, I wasn't really focusing on it. And it certainly increases access, and probably, I don't know what the studies show if it increases turnout. Intuitively, one would expect that, but I never assume anything. But, I worry because I know that hundreds of thousands and probably millions of people don't ever receive their mail ballots that they request in the mail before Election Day or on time to use them. And that's even before the pandemic. And I'm following that a little more carefully. And sure enough, that is happening in lots of places. And it really worries me with Trump having put his postmaster in. And so, I just think we have to improve all of our processes as much as possible. It includes vote by mail. And it also includes not overstating the security of anything, because, we may be, after overstating how perfectly secure it is, when there are little holes that should be plugged, then what if you're the one in a position that needs to challenge something? So,
Right. I mean, speaking about the post office, one of the issues that came up during our primary was, the board received absentee ballots after the election. And because the post office doesn't actually put a stamp with a date on all of our mail, then it's up to these county boards to decide, well, did they put it in the mail ahead of time? And so what I would encourage people to do, if you can do this, either send your ballot back. I mean, you can already request your ballot in North Carolina now. And I would recommend request your absentee ballot now. And then
if you want to vote by mail, though, you're not necessarily.
And send it back early if you're going to vote by mail. And if it's close, if it's at all within a week or two of the election day, personally, if I were going to vote by mail and send it back that close to the election, I would physically take it to the post office and have them hand stamp a date on it. And that is what I did contact our board, and that's what they recommended that people do. And now that's not always possible for everyone, but I just don't see why the post office can't just put a date on it. I mean, it's not that hard.
What about drop boxes? Do you guys have drop boxes?
We don't. There are some groups that are really pushing the legislators to enact legislation that would allow for drop boxes, but they don't have that right now.
Because in general, that's what I'm recommending I'm not recommending vote by mail, but if you vote by mail, yes, request it right away to avoid mail delays. And then if you can, and I didn't know North Carolina didn't have this, if you can, I recommend
and we have curbside voting. Yeah, we have curbside voting on election day and during early voting. So
can people do that with their mail ballot in North Carolina? Take it to curbside voting?
You can take your absentee by mail ballot to an early voting site and go in and physically drop it off there, or take it to the Board of Elections, or put it through the mail.
I don't know. I just, who knows? Because the postmaster is talking about delaying mail further and further. I mean, I think like if people can drop it off at a vote center, what do you think?
Well,
versus the mail.
If
chain of custody again, right?
Yeah, chain of custody. It all boils down to chain of custody. You have, if you take it to an early voting site, they're not going to mark that in any way. So it's unclear what the chain of custody is once you drop it off there. And so, I encourage everyone to vote. If you don't want to go in because you can't stand in line for a long time, or you have a disability, or you can curbside vote. You wait in your car, they bring you your ballot, you fill it out, they put it in the tabulator for you. And I've watched that process.
It's hand marked in North Carolina, most of North Carolina, not all.
Not all. Yeah, most of North Carolina is hand marked. So.
Yeah, unfortunately, the largest, most populous county is not. I do want to ask you about that in a second, but I know I go through all the points that you have mentioned to me previously. So you mentioned that there's some complicating factors about making election integrity progress in North Carolina.
Yeah.
Go through some of those?
Sure. So North Carolina is a little bit unique. Other states have a Secretary of State where if I were having this issue in a different state, I could contact the Secretary of State to say, hey, this is what's going on. What are your thoughts? And then they would oversee the board. In North Carolina, the Secretary of State does not oversee our elections. It's really incumbent upon our legislators to provide oversight. And unfortunately, what I'm hearing from legislators, even one of the legislators who enacted the legislation that I'm questioning, what we hear is, oh, I'm too busy, I'm swamped. Yeah, they're breaking the law, but this was a good one. But we support the governor.
Can you tell me who said that?
I would rather not say.
Okay, that's all right. You don't have to. But wait, you're saying that the legislator who wrote the law is saying the legislature has exclusive oversight over the Secretary of State?
No, over the State Board of Elections.
Over the State Board of Elections doesn't want to exercise that oversight.
Right. And we've been, myself and some other advocates from other groups have been told by legislators that, yeah, they're not really following what we intended, but they really just don't want to do much about it. And so, so that kind of leaves us.
I don't even understand though, how would a legislator exercise oversight?
What does that even mean? They can form a special committee to investigate these things.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But they're not doing it.
No. And
is there a special part of the state legislature that you can add, that people could ever write to if there's a problem, saying you need to form a special committee to investigate X, Y, and Z?
there have been people who have done that, and
Who would they write?
so you would write there's an elections and ethics committee. There's a standing committee in the House and in the Senate. And I know people have written to both asking, this was more during the certification of our election machines. The state was deciding what to certify, and they actually didn't do all of the things necessary for certification, but they went ahead and certified anyway. And again, we were told we're really busy. They did actually try to push back on the board a little bit, but then, they're just not, they're busy. They're doing other things. I think that structure needs to change, honestly.
What about the media? Can they help with this?
So the media has reported on a few of the issues, and they did report when the state board and ES&S sort of did this bait and switch job on the machines that they had certified machines that ran Windows CE6. This was only this past year. And knowing that they were going to just swap it out with something different, and kind of forego all of the steps that they needed to do to actually certify those. So they're willing to report on some things. I've gone to some reporters, and what I hear is, well, we don't want to discourage voters. And, I'm honestly hesitant to talk about this absentee ballot process that we have, because I don't want to discourage voters. But at the same time, it's almost as if, I've gone to the county, I've gone to the state, I've gone to the legislators. And at this point, I almost feel like you have to go to the media and to the public and say, hey, if you don't like this process, you better speak up now, because this is what you're going to get in November if things don't change. And so I'm kind of at the end of the line as far as trying to convince the people in charge that they need to do the right thing. And I am at the point now where I am going to just start going public with it.
And, there was a Harris poll. It was Sue Halpern at the New Yorker who, that was the first time I saw it. She put it in one of her articles, but it was in 2018 before the midterms, where people said they were actually more likely to vote because they were concerned about election tampering than less likely. I think the idea being, you hear this vote numbers too big to rig. And so I think there's an assumption, really only by one of the two parties, by the Democrats, that you can't talk about concerns with the process because it'll depress turnout. And I'm just not convinced it's true. I almost feel like the GOP planted this idea so that we wouldn't complain about any of the areas where, things could possibly be manipulated. And the GOP is, they tell all their voters that the Democrats are cheating, and they're not worried about suppressing turnout, and it doesn't seem to suppress their turnout. If anything, they have people showing up as poll workers. And I think telling people about these vulnerabilities, to me, as long as you explain to them how to get involved in the process, it gets people involved, which in turn makes them more likely to vote anyway. But I don't know. But yes, that is a concern, and I hear it occasionally, obviously, as well, when I talk about.
Yeah, and I think one of the best measures to figure out voter turnout is, has somebody voted in a previous election? You're not going to discourage people who have voted in the past. You're just not. They're still going to vote, even if they know there are problems. And these problems can be solved in North Carolina with no money. It's not going to cost any more money. It's not going to, these problems are solvable, but people need to get involved and need to reach out to the board, to reach out to the state and say, this is what we want. And I'm actually putting together a petition, and it will be, I'll put the links on my Twitter feed for how people can sign this petition. And I'm encouraging every Wake County voter to show up on election night at the Board of Elections. I will be there.
Every voter.
I know other people will be there. I mean, we deserve to see our votes counted, and it's the law.
It's the light mob, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so what about, let's see. Was there anything else that you felt was sort of an obstacle toward making process toward election integrity in North Carolina?
I think the state board has been they've been openly hostile to the public who have reached out in a kind and well-meaning way, with some great advice of, hey, voters are concerned about this. One of the things I said was, with COVID, the public is allowed to go in on election night after the polls close to see the machine see that poll tape being generated. I said, in light of COVID, would you be willing to instruct counties to instruct their poll workers to post the tape on a window, so people could stand outside and view that poll tape? And I was told no.
Wow. Yeah, we got to work on changing that with the poll tapes. I wonder, what if we had more people could poll workers photograph them, or will they get in?
No, anybody can.
So maybe an answer to that is we need to be able to do it as observers, not poll workers, but to get poll workers who know to photograph the poll tapes.
Right. Yeah. And we're working on a project in that vein, where we are reaching out to people who are already going to be at the polls on election night to understand their rights as a member of the public, and then B, photograph those poll tapes and then get them to our volunteers who are going to be verifying those numbers with the county.
Okay, great. So Transparent Elections North Carolina, how many volunteers do you have? How many do you want? And how can people reach you?
So right now there are about 12 to 15 of us, which is
pretty good.
Way more than I had last year to helping.
That's fantastic.
The best way to reach me right now is on Twitter. My Twitter handle is @Bernstein_Lynn. There's also a Facebook page that people can go to, Transparent Elections NC. And I will post all the links there of the petition and how to get involved. We are meeting remotely via Zoom to put together some of these projects to collect poll tapes and try to get access on election night, and try to convince some of these counties that if they change a few things, then they are less likely to get into legal trouble following the election.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of this really interesting information with me. I appreciate it. And thank you for your work too. It's fantastic.
Thank you so much for all you're doing as well. Thank you.
Of course. All right. Well, we'll talk soon. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.